All right, so welcome to the Apply Online webinar part 1. In this webinar, we'll be covering setting up the inquiry form and online application. After the webinar, if you have any questions or comments or suggestions, please email support@pcreducator.com so that we can address them. My primary goal in the webinar is to kind of get you to the point where you can start comfortably editing your own application. And you should have some sort of template that you normally use. So you may already have a link to your Apply Online application. And even if you do not have it right now, you may get that in the next couple of days, but it'll look somewhat similar to my screen that I have here. And many of the pages that you see on this demo will be similar to the pages that you have in your template. And my goal is to kind of show you how to edit the template so that it works with the questions that you want to ask in your application. And to start off, I kind of want to cover the big picture of the Apply Online application setup so you can get a sense of how everything is connected. And once I do that, then I'll go over the specific parts of the inquiry form and application. And in the next webinar, my goal is to cover the teacher recommendations, and I'm also going to add events to that second webinar. We may also even cover part of application in the second webinar, depending on if I can get through to all of it today or not, because the last thing I'd want to do is push through this. So in terms of the big setup, the big parts that you would want to consider before you start editing your Apply Online is that you should create a login that you'll be using to make edits to your application. And the login, you can create that under security and make sure that you link it to a test family so that when you use that login, you can actually start testing it with the test family to kind of see what information looks like in your form. So in most cases, schools just create a login called Apply Online Setup, which is what I have done as well. And that login, you just want to make sure that you give the access of at least website full. So you'd want to have a login before you even start. It could be your own login and you can connect it to a test family, but I like to use a separate login for myself when I'm setting up the Apply Online, and then I like to connect it to a test family and I give it the website role at least. Once you have your login created, you can go to your Apply Online login page and just make sure that you can actually log in with that. So let me make sure. And the way that you know that you have the right access is if you can see the admin and content link on the top left-hand side. If you cannot see, you might also come here and hover over it and you'll see like this hand. But basically, if you have the right privileges, you should be able to see the admin and content links because that's what you need in order to make changes to the application. So once I log in, I can even click the back button and I can get to my login page and I can still see these admin content links because I'm still logged into the application. So that's the first thing. Second thing, as a big picture, you need to know is that each page has an ID. So if I'm on the Applicant Apply Online login page, the ID here says 17007. If I'm on any other page in the CMS portal, I'll see the ID on that specific page and so forth. The reason you'd want to make sure that you know how to look up the IDs because if you submit a support ticket and you have a problem setting up a page, you can just give us the ID and say something like, on this page ID, I'm trying to add this control, but I'm having trouble doing it. So what should I do? So this ID really helps us figure out what page where you are accessing the portal from. So that's one big thing to remember. The next thing is that you want to consider all the pages you'll be using in your Apply Online application because many times I've heard from schools that they don't realize what all pages are there and where they're located. So the first page you need to know is the Apply Online login page, which is this page that I'm here right now. This is the first page perhaps from your school's website that the applicants will be sent to. And if they already have a login, so if they're an existing parent, they can use their parent login and start the application for a new child. If they're a brand new family, they'll see a link, something that says click here to establish an inquiry form. So the first page you need to know about is the apply online page. The second page, if you click the link, you'll see that it takes you to the inquiry page. So this is the second page you need to be aware of that your school will definitely use. The third page is called the applicant profile page. And the way that you get to the applicant profile page is that you log in using your apply online setup. You log in using your apply online setup account and it'll bring you to the applicant profile page. This is kind of a dashboard that lets families see all of their information kind of in a snapshot. So they can see there's two applicant information, they can see the family information, they can sign up for events, they can view their payments, they can request recommendation forms, they can even see what their status is for the application, what they still have to complete, what they have already completed, and so forth. So you have to make sure that you know where your applicant profile page is, and the way you get to it is by logging in through the apply online login. There might be a case when you log in, it sends you back to the inquiry form. What that indicates is that you're not connected to either a test family, or if you are connected to a test family, they don't have any real applicants. So if it does bring you to the inquiry form, maybe you can just create a test applicant and click continue to application. And then for sure, it'll bring you to the applicant profile page. So that's the second, that's the other big page you have to know of. The other pages that you have to know about are the application pages. The way that you find out where your application pages are located is that once you log into the application, you click admin on the top left-hand side. You click pages. You go to sitemaps. So you go to sitemaps here, and then you'll see a sitemap called apply online left menu. If you go to details of that, this is where you can see your other application pages. So the first few pages that I went over were more outside of the application, like the inquiry form, the apply online login page, the applicant profile page. These are kind of outside the application. But if you go to the sitemap, that will show you the sitemap apply online left menu. That'll actually show you what pages are inside the application. So if you're here, you can click on any of the pages and it'll actually take you to the inside of the application. So if your question is, okay, how do I know what all the pages are there in my application? The easiest way would be to go through the sitemap and see, okay, these are all the pages and they go in this order. Then the final big page you kind of have to consider is your thank you. So when someone submits the inquiry online, when someone submits an inquiry form, they are sent to a thank you page. So if they click continue to application, they'll be taken to the applicant profile page, which we've already looked over. But if they click submit, they'll be taken to the thank you page. So you also need to know where your thank you page is located. In my example, the way that I find it is I go to admin, I go to pages, and I just search for the word thank you. So I believe it's called thank you inquiry. And if I click on it, it'll take me to this page. So this is a thank you page. When they click the submit button on the inquiry form, it'll take them to the thank you page. So right now, I just want you to know that this is a page that you should be able to find, and that you should be able to maybe even bookmark or save it somewhere, because you may need to update this page later on when you're setting up the application. And this page is not located on the sitemap. So this is a page that you would actually find by searching through pages. So these are the big pages: your apply online login page or inquiry form, your applicant profile page, your application pages, which are found through the sitemap, and your thank you pages. So this is the thank you page for the inquiry form. You may have a separate thank you page for when they submit the application, but we'll look at that later on. The next Big thing you have to know is the emails and when they go out. The first email will go out when they submit the inquiry form. So when they click continue to application or click submit, that's the first email that will go out to your family. The purpose of that email is to give them their login credentials and perhaps give them the link to the applicant login page so that if they don't finish the application the first time, they can go back to that link and they can finish up the application. Or if they have submitted the application, maybe they just want to review the status of the application. The first email will go out when they submit the application. The second email will go out the first email will go out when they submit the inquiry form. The second email will go out when they submit the application. Because the first email will usually give them their login credentials, you would go to campus and you would set that email up under security, because security is where we keep the login credentials. So you can pick any user, it doesn't matter. You can go to email merge and you can set up an email template here. So we have documentations and videos on how to do this, so I won't do that right now. But in this example, I have this one called new inquiry receive, and I can load it. And this is what my email looks like. You can see I have the username, I have the password, and I have the link to the apply online page, so that when the parent receives this email, they'll be able to see their credentials, and then if they don't finish or if they want to check their status later on, they'll have this email to refer to so that they can access the application. So this is the first big email. The second big email is when they get what they get when they submit the application. That email, because it doesn't really have login information, that email is kept under admissions inquiry applicant screen. So if you go to admissions inquiries applicants, you can select anybody. It doesn't go to multi-action menu and go to email merge. And this is where you can set it up. So in my example, I have this template called application received. And it just says like, thank you for submitting the application. If you want, you can sign up for events and so forth. But this is where that second email template is set up. So the next big thing I'd like to cover is the inquiry attributes. The purpose of inquiry attributes is to create any custom fields that we don't already have in the database. A good example of that would be applicant essays. Because each school will have their own kind of essays that they'll be asking from the applicants, those are not fields that we already have in the database. So before you create questions about asking applicants questions in terms of asking applicants essay questions, you need to create those fields beforehand in the database. So when you're creating those controls in your application, you would be able to make sure that they link to the right field in the database, because that'll play a huge role when you're running reports later on. So in campus, if you go to admissions, maintenance, inquiry attributes, you can set up your attributes here. Some schools, what they do is they separate them based on the different sections of their application. Like you have current school info, you have other schools applying to previous school, siblings, legacy, and so forth. But then you may have, we also have some other schools that keep everything in one category, like application, and then put all the attributes within that. In my experience, it's probably easy to separate them if you have a lot of attributes. But if you only have a few attributes, you can keep them in one section. So you could create a new category here by saying like application online, or if it's specific pages, you can say applicant essay or so forth. Once you create the category, you can select the category from here, and you can type in a short description of that question. So this is more for you. Parents won't be able to see the description. You'll be able to give them a long description when you're setting up your application form. But the big thing to keep in mind is the range here that says global and year specific, and then the types. So if you make something global, that information will not change from year to year. So if you're asking them a question, let's just say like what their eye color is or something. Assuming their eye color is not going to change from year to year, you would use global attributes. But let's say that you're asking them essay questions, or you're asking them like their T-shirt size or something like that. That information may change from year to year. So if you have someone that does not get accepted the first year and they're looking to apply again, you have to consider, do you want them to put the information again, or do you want that information to be saved from the previous year and just display that so that they can save the application and submit it without having to retype all of that information. So these two are really important things to note when you're creating inquiry attributes. The next thing is the type. When you're asking questions on the inquiry form, you might expect certain types of answers. So let's say that you want them to put in some sort of signature and a date. The date field should be a type of date because that attribute will only allow them to pick a date. It won't let them type in like words and characters. It'll only let them put in a date. Or if you're asking them a question about how many math classes they took, you probably want to use an integer because you may not want them to be able to type in normal alphabetic characters. So it depends on your question. The Boolean is for check marks. Free text is what you're mostly going to use. This will be used for any sort of questions where they'll be typing in the answer, like like essays, and then lookups are for any sort of drop-down questions. So if you're asking them to pick a program or something and there are a few choices, you're going to use a lookup, and then you can create different types of lookups. So that could be something we can cover in the next webinar, but the lookup will be used for a drop-down option. So most likely, I think over 90% of the time, you're just going to use free text. Now let me go back to the inquiry form again. And the next big idea I'd like to cover is the most common controls that you will use in your inquiry online and in your application. So when you log in, you'll see, if you have the right privileges, you'll see the admin and content links. If you click on content at the top left, you see an add control option here. And then you'll see different container options. In most cases, you're going to use the main container, and it'll highlight what that container is for you. So when you drop a control, you'll kind of know where that control will go. The most common controls, the first one is under content and is called text. The text control is used for any sort of instructions. So in this example is a text control. So if you want to give them any sort of instructions, if they have any questions, who to call or who to email, these are the kind of things that you would use the text control for. And the other questions where you're actually asking them for information, in like 90% of the time, you're going to use a wizard box. Wizard box allows you to actually ask them specific question that they'll be inputting answers for. So if I click this wizard box control here, I'll see different tables and fields. So the most common tables you're going to use is the inquiries. The inquiries table will have all the major questions you would be asking applicants, like what grade level they're applying for, what their name is, what academic year they're applying for, things like that. So you'll find them under the inquiries table. The other very common table is the households table. This is the table you use for all of their family information, the address, the parent information, the phone numbers, the emails, the work information, everything like that should be found under the households table. So depending on what information you're trying to add, you would pick a specific field, and then you would use in most cases, it would to the right type. So in this case, it would be a text box because it is an address field. And then if you click finish, it'll take you to the next screen where you can actually put in a label. So let's say that I'll just call it address for demo right now or for webinar. That way I know to delete it after. If it is a question that is a required question, you would check the is required box. If it is something you want to give them like an example for, let's say that you're asking them for household salutation and you want to give them an example of what the salutation should look like Mr. and Mrs. Smith or whatnot, you can put in an example here. So because this is an address field, I'll just say 123 Choke Cherry Street. Mask is used for phone numbers only. So if you are asking them for a phone number, you can put in a mask, and it's something like this. Let's say if you want parentheses, and then wherever the numbers will go, you put pound signs. And what that'll do is when they type in the number, it'll force it to be in this format. So many schools have asked us how to do that, like because they have different formats that come in for phone numbers. So this is an easy way to make it a mask value. So it'll always force them to put it their phone number in that format. Then in the text box mode, you'll in most cases leave it at default. There's a multi-line and multi-line with autosave. These are used for essays. Multi-line will present a bigger box for them to type in. Multi-line with autosave will give a bigger box, but it'll autosave the response every 15 seconds because previously there would be many families that would type in essays and then their browser would time out or something else would happen with their internet connection and they would lose that information. So this feature automatically saves their answers every 15 seconds. So then I just click the save button. And it creates this control for me where I can type in the information and then I can grab it and move it up and down. So that's basically how you enter a control, and then you also have the example here. Now, if you wanted to edit any control, like if you wanted to edit a label, if you wanted to make something required, not required, and so forth, you simply just go to the properties of the control. And you can change the label or you can make it not required or anything like that. So if you ever have any questions on, okay, how do I make a change to this control, or I'm trying to make this not required or something like that, the first option is to always look at the properties of the control because they'll most likely answer that question for you. So as an example, let's say that each year we get schools that are asking us, oh, how do I update my inquiry form so it shows the next academic year? So the answer is usually you go to the properties of the academic year control and you simply make your next year visible to the applicants, or you disable the previous years by unchecking or checking boxes, and then that'll update your form so that new new inquiry years are available. So most likely if you have a question on how to add something to a control, most likely if you check the property of the control, you may be able to figure out the answer through that way. And so I'll go ahead and delete this control because I don't really need it. And then if you are ever in this mode, so this is what we call the content mode. If you click view page, it'll take you back to the normal view. So content, click content, it'll take you to the content mode. Click view page, it'll take you back to the normal view. Now, the next part is I actually want to now get started with the inquiry form, and I've already shown you how to add controls. If you wanted to remove a control, you can X out any control that you do not want on your form. Or if you wanted to make changes to existing text, you can click the properties of the control. And you can simply change whatever you'd like and then click save, and it'll update in your inquiry page for everybody else going forward. Let's say that if you do make some changes and you decide, oh, I messed up, I don't really want to save this, instead of clicking save, just click the finish button and your changes won't be saved. But if you do want to save them, make sure that you click the save button. The next thing about the inquiry form is, so The inquiry form will be used for first-time applicants. So if someone already is a parent to the school, you're not going to send the inquiry form first. You're always going to send them to the login page that we looked at previously, and they'll use their credentials to log in first. And if they use their credentials to log in and they don't have any other applicant in the system, it'll automatically bring them to the inquiry online page, and they'll already see their information filled out, like at least their family information will already be populated for them. The reason I'm saying this is that there are a lot of schools that have parents that have already been in the system previously. Maybe they were donors or they were former parents and now they have a new child and so forth. And they try to complete a brand new inquiry form, and because their information is already in the system, they get an error that says something like, your information already exists, please call the school and so forth. But if they're already a parent and you have them use their own credentials, then it'll automatically pick up what information we have in our database for them, and they can just continue with their inquiry form, or if they have already an applicant in the system, they can continue with their application. But brand new parents will come to the login page. They won't have a login. They'll be redirected to the inquiry online page. The other thing is, on the inquiry online page, there are certain controls that you absolutely need. You absolutely need the last name. You absolutely need the first name. You need the birth date. You need the academic year, and you need the applying for grade level ID. The reason you need the first name, last name, birth date is because we use that to identify if someone is a duplicate student. So if Catherine Delareggi already existed in my database and I tried submitting her form, I would get an error that says that this person already exists. And the way that we identify duplicates is using the combination of first name, last name, and birth date. So that's why these three fields are important. Then, of course, you need to know what academic year they're applying for, so that's also important. And then we also have to know what grade level they're applying for. So these fields you have to have. All the other fields like parent information, and contact email, the household email has to be in the system, because this is the email that will be used for their username. So whatever email they put in the household email will become their user email, and it'll also become their username. So the email is also required, but everything else is kind of up to you what information you may want to collect from them, but it's not necessarily required for you to set up the inquiry form. So the next thing is, I'd like to cover the inquiry submit control, because there are certain things that you have to be aware of on these controls. So first thing is that continue to application button and the submit button, these are both the same controls and they're called inquiry submit control. The only difference is that when they click continue to application, it'll take them to the applicant profile page where they can just start the application. Whereas when they click submit, it'll just take them to the thank you page. So they might not necessarily want to start the application right away. They may want to do it later on. So that's why we keep both buttons, but the only difference is that they redirect people to a different page. Some schools only want the continue to application button. Some schools may not want people to start the application right away, so they may remove continue to application button, but that's up to you. But these both are set up the same way. So if I click the properties of this control, I'll go over the main things that you have to understand. So the first thing is actions on submit. When someone submits the inquiry form, we tag them with certain actions so that when you're running reports later on through campus, you can see when someone submitted the inquiry form, because when they get the inquiry action, it'll have a date on it and it'll also have the email that submitted the form. In most cases, you're going to just check inquiry and inquiry on application online actions. These two actions almost all schools use, so these two would be checked off so that when someone submits the form, they'll be tagged with these two actions. The next thing is the button text. So like I named it as continue to application. You can call it continue or submit or whatnot. That's all up to you. The other one is we have add email to inquiry and add email to user. So I had gone over where this email is generated. So that's under security. We went over that. The way you link it is that you will see that template in the drop down. You select the template and make sure you click the add button. And if you do, you'll see it show up right below it. That's how that is actually linked. I have seen some people get confused because they see it here and they think that it's linked, but it has to be added and it has to show below it for it to actually be linked. The add email to user email usually sends them the login credentials, but let's say for some reason you don't want to send any credentials. You simply want to just thank them for submitting the inquiry and maybe give them a link to sign up for events or something. If that's the case, if you're not sending any login credentials, you could technically create your email under inquiries applicants, like this, the email that we were looking at earlier for application submit. When people submit the application, you could create it there and link it the same way here. In this scenario, they really won't get login credentials, but almost all the schools I've worked with use the add email to user instead of the add email to inquiry. The next thing is the errors here. So anytime there's some sort of error, we have some we have some default values that we show to families. Like for example, if the student is already in the system, say something like, please contact your school as this student is already in the system. But here you can customize those messages. So you can put in your own phone number here or your email address if there's a duplicate student, or you can even provide them with instructions. So if there's a duplicate student, you can say that your student already exists. Please make sure that you're using your current login credentials to access the apply online application or something like that. Then we have the duplicate student email sent. So for some reason, if the student is a duplicate and the parent information also matches in the inquiry form, and that family also has a login credential, then we can automatically send them an email that would let them know that they can reset their password if they don't already remember their password and log in instead of trying to fill out a completely new inquiry form. And that email would be set up under security as well, and it would be connected under the add forgotten email. So just to automatically send out an email to families to let them know that, okay, you already have a login, please log in instead of doing a brand new inquiry form. Then if for some reason they don't have a login but their email already exists in the system, you can put in a message that they have to reach out to you. Then on your end, you would connect their family information to their login information or create a login for them and provide it to them. Error email format, error email in use. So things like that, you can just put in a customized message. But if you don't, we also show a default message if nothing is in here. Send user email. Whenever they submit it, do you always want to send them an email to thank them, or you only want to send them an email if they're a brand new user? So if they're a current parent or if they've already applied for one child and you don't want to send them another email second time, you can do new user only. Otherwise, most schools use always. There might be some scenarios where you may not want to do a duplicate check, but I really haven't seen any school use that. But you would check this if you don't want the system to check that this person is a duplicate. And then the thank you page location, this is where you specify when they click this button, where do you want to direct them to. So you're either going to direct them to the applicant profile page if they want to start the application, or you're going to direct them to a thank you page if you don't really want them to start the application right away, because some schools, they have a period where they just accept inquiries, and then a couple of months later they send out a mass email for people that submitted inquiries, and then they give them the application link. So if that's the case for your school, you can link this page to just a thank you page if you don't want them to actually start the application. All right, so that covers the inquiry form. The next part I want to cover is the applicant profile page. So again, the parent will the applicant profile page when they submit the application. So this is what the applicant profile page looks like. Um, we'll cover the recommendations and events in the next webinar, and this applicant profile page will already be part of your template anyways. But there is one major control that I do want to show you because you'll need to edit this control because this will be different for each school, like the settings on the control. But everything else you can kind of play around with the other controls, and you can decide what you may want to show the family, what you may want to hide from the family. And if there's something that you definitely don't want them to see, just delete it. Like if you're not using our events or if you're not using the teacher recommendation, if you see the control, simply delete it if you're not going to use it, and you'll be able to add it back on. Under the admissions profile category here, we have actions, applications, events, payments, recommendations, and school info. These would be corresponding to the controls here. So if something you do want to add, if you don't have it, you can add it here. Or if you want to remove, you can remove it. But the big control I'd want to go over is the applications control here. So if I go to the properties of this control, the first big thing is that you want to make sure that your academic years are set up. So in the inquiry form was what people were inquiring for. This is what people will actually, the academic years you want to open for people to actually apply to. So we often get questions about how do I update the academic year on my application because people are applying for the wrong academic years. This is usually the case because the school may not have updated the academic year to point to the next academic year. So here you can open 2 years at a time, or if you just want to open 1 year for application, you can set the other drop down to blank and just open the one. What action do you want to give them when they submit the application? Most likely application received or application submitted depending on your school. Then application started action is most likely going to be online application in progress. What will happen is that when someone clicks the apply online for the first time, so let's say that if I click apply online for the first time here, and if I go through my application but I don't finish my application, it'll say online application in progress, so then I can just continue for next time. So that's where you specify the action in the properties of the control. And then the other thing is you can specify the apply online grade level. So what grade levels you want them to be able to apply for, you can check off here. Apply online location. So when they do click apply online, which page do you want to take them to? Most likely you would look at your application. Most likely it'll be the applicant information page. So that would be the page that you would normally send them to when they start the application. And then the titles is just going to be applications, and then submitted location. You can specify the page that they'll be using to submit the application on. Most likely it's going to be called, I believe it's called the pay and submit page. So it's called the payment and submit. In your case, it might be something different. But if you remember, I was looking at the sitemap earlier, and the page here is called payment and submit. So that's why I am linking it to this page right now. Show is if you want to show them all their previous years that they may have applied for and their PDF applications for previous years. You can check those. If not, you can leave it unchecked. The other controls are pretty self-explanatory. The events and recommendations, will come back to them later. And you'll notice that initially you could see that I had several recommendations that I could request. I had several events that I could sign up for, but now I have less information. and I have less information under status update. The reason is because now I'm actually applying for a new academic year, meaning that the way my application is set up is that not able to request for recommendations unless I complete my application. But because previously I hadn't even started the 1920 application, I was still in the 1819 application. I could see a lot more information because I had completed much more for that application than I did for the 1819 application. The next thing is that here at the top, you can switch between different kids, and you can also start a new inquiry form. So if a parent wants to start a new inquiry form, they can click new inquiry here. There's also property on the control where you can actually make it a button so that it stands out. But the parent will be able to switch between their kids from these drop downs, and then they'll be able to see, they'll be able to sign up for events and do recommendations and so forth. So the next part that I actually want to go over is the actual application. So the way that I got to the application is that when I'm under Applicant Profile, I can click Apply Now, and it'll actually take me to the application. For this student, I'm looking at her last year's application because I don't want these check marks to be unchecked because I want to get through to different pages. But normally, let's say that if you don't know how to get to a certain page in the application, you follow the instructions from the beginning, where you go to Sitemap and you just click on the page, and it'll take you to that specific page so that you can make changes to the pages. Now, the big things under the application pages is your, it'll work very similar to your inquiry form, where you have your pages already set up, like at least a template that we give you have certain pages already there. Your main job is to add and remove controls or edit controls to match what you want your application to look like. For example, let's say that I wanted to change the wording on the control called applicant first name to just first name. I can click the properties of the control here, and I simply just change this to first name and click save, and that'll update it for me. Or if I wanted to add some information under applicant information, I can click the properties of this control. I can change the heading here, or I can add more text to it right below it and then save it, and it'll reflect. So the basic idea of adding controls, removing controls, editing controls is the same thing as we went through in the actual application. And then some of the controls, like for example, birth date, you can see how this is automatically a date picker. Academic year is a drop down. So these are fields that we already have in the database, but even in the custom fields that you create, we went over how you can make those date fields or drop down fields or just text fields. So that's how you kind of determine what kind of control each person will be. The next page is I won't go over all the pages, but I'll go over some of the major pages that you'll probably would be looking at. The next page is the family information page. All of this information is coming from the households table. So initially, when I had went over one of the most common controls was the wizard box. And within the wizard box, you have the households table. So this is where most of the information you'll find in this page is coming from. Your address, your parent information, your emails, your phone numbers, everything is coming from here. Then the other major page I want to go over to kind of showcase what the inquiry attributes does is the applicant essay page. Applicant essay page, in the first part, I have my instructions, which I use the text control for. Then here I actually have a question. So here I ask them their question. Then I actually have the control where they can put in the question. So if I open up my control here, you can see that the attribute I'm using, so the table is called attribute inquiries, which we went over. And the field is essay question because this is the name that I gave to my attribute when I was creating it. And the text mode is multi-line. I may as well make it multi-line with autosave so that it autosaves every 15 seconds. And if I wanted, I could also make it a requirement so that they have to in order to go through the application. So I could also make it required if I wanted to. So this is an example of how you would use the attributes field. You could create the attributes field, and if the question, let's say, wasn't an essay, it was just a normal question, you could just make it a default, and what that'll do is it'll make it a small text box where they can just type in a few words. So that's the difference between a default and a multi-line and a multi-line with autosave. Okay, so the next part is I'd like to go over the required forms page, and then we'll go over the submit application page, and then after that I'll show you how to add a new page, and then we should be done. So the required forms allows you to give them the option to update files through controls that we have in the system. For the required forms page, the control that you're going to use, and you would only use this if you actually want them to upload files. So the first is that I use a text control just as a description, like what I'm asking for: transcript release, current report card, medical form, and so forth. Then the control that I am actually going to be using is under updatable, and it's called the inquiry actions file upload. And when you add that control, you can specify what action you want to link the control to. So if you would create these actions in your campus portal. Once you create the actions, you can link them to this action type control, and we have very thorough document on how to create action. So once you create your action, you can specify the action on this control, and you can specify what types of extensions you'll accept for those files. So if you're asking for a document, maybe you only check off PDF or Word, or if you're asking for some sort of image, maybe you'll check off only PNG or GIF or JPEG or so forth. You can make it required. You can also make it as file removable. That'll allow them to, if they accidentally upload the wrong file, they can remove the file and then re-upload it, and so forth. So this is a control you'll use for that purpose. Then the final thing on this screen is the submit application. There are a couple of really important controls that you have to know about. The first one is called the application summary control. This is the control you'll use to specify how much you're going to charge your applicants. So let's say that if you're charging everybody, in this example, it just says $2, but let's say that if you're charging everybody a $50 application fee, you can put in the $50 and you can click this arrow. It'll move it down. I'm just going to remove this one. It'll move it down. If you do want them to be able to use waiver codes to get a discount, you can check show waiver codes, and we have a document on how to create waiver codes, which you can do, and they'll be able to type in waiver codes and get a discount. But you can specify the amount, and you can click the drop down and save it, and that's what they'll be charged. But let's say that you actually want them to be charged different prices depending on different criteria. So if you have different grade level students and you want to charge, let's say, high school applicants a higher fee than lower school applicants, the way you would do it is that you would set up your filters in campus. Filters, you can set them up in campus, and there's a lot of documentation on that too, because I could give a lecture on how filters work and it'll take me like an hour or more. So I won't go over that, but basically you select a filter and you specify how much you want to charge to applicants that fit in this filter. So if I wanted to charge lower school applicants like $30, I could click this drop down and move it down, and it'll say that, okay, $30 for my LS students. If you are using filters, you should use them for all of your options. So usually the blank filter, if you don't select the filter, would apply to everybody. But if you have a condition where different people should be charged different amounts, then you shouldn't have any line with a blank filter value. Then in that case, you should just have different lines that cover all of your groups of applicants. So I would say like applicant US, and then I might put $50. And then if I had another group, I could select another group and put in another amount and so forth. But yeah, you can use filter to specify different amounts here. So this is one of the major controls. And now you can even see that the application fee shows up here because the person that I'm using is in 12th grade, so they're a high school student, so their application fee is $50. The other major control that I'd want to go over, the credit card and e-check payments control should already be there for you. So I won't go over these, but the application submit control is really important. So if you open up this control, first thing you want to specify is what actions they should receive when they submit the application. So most likely you have application received action already or application submitted, something along those lines. You already should also have a application received office version. The office version is used for administrators so that it won't show like all the major instruction controls. It will just show them the question and the answer that the applicant put in, so that it'll be a condensed version of the PDF in Campus. So that's why we have both options. Actions on submit, what action do you want to give them when they submit the application? Most likely application received, and apply online should be sufficient for almost all the schools that we have. The other part I'd go over is the submit application. So this would be the button text. So you can call it submit application, anything like that. This is just the label on the submit control. If you want to send out an email to your admissions team, you would set up the email template under increase applicants, which we went over towards the beginning. So you could have an email that goes out to the applicant, and you can have a different email that goes out to your admissions team. The difference might be that in the email that goes out to the applicant, you may have a longer email that thanks them and gives them more information about your events and things like that, whereas your email to the admissions might just be, you've received a new applicant, this is their academic year, this is their grade level, and just very brief information. Payment required, if you're asking for the application fee, make sure this is checked. Process in test mode is usually if you're trying to test your payment configuration to make sure that people can submit their application. So for example, let's say that if I'm in test mode, I can put in some fake credit card information and submit the application just so I can test and make sure that I'm able to submit the application. But if I'm in live mode, then I would need to put in some real credit card or e-check information. So that's what the test mode is for. Make sure that your payment configuration is selected here. So we have document on how to set up your payment configuration in Campus. Once you set it up, you would come here and just link it to this control here or field here. So when they submit the application, their payment information will go to your payment gateway so that they can process the payment and then send that over to you. And then initially, I was talking about the thank you page when someone submits the application. In my example, I don't really send them to a separate thank you page. I just send them back to the applicant profile page. The reason is that the applicant profile page has like a summary of all of their information, what their status is, what they have to do next. So I don't see a reason for me to have a separate thank you page after they submit the application. But if you wanted a separate thank you page for whatever reason, you could create one and just link it through the success link here. And then finally, the add thank you email. So we already went over that earlier. You just select the right template. You click add and you save it. So when someone submits the application, they would get that email to let them know that they've submitted the application and what their next steps are, and so forth. So finally, one quick thing I want to cover before I end the webinar is how do I add more pages to the left menu, because we often get this question. The initial email that I sent out, I provided some documents on how to create pages and sitemaps and so forth. But let's assume that you already have a page created. You just want to have it show up here somewhere. What you do is you go to your sitemap, you click the plus sign here. In my example, I have a page called like Program A or something like that. So you select the page that you have already created. You can give it a title. It could be the same title as the page name, or you can use a different title and then click Save. And then you can use these arrows to move this page up and down. So next time when you go back to the screen and refresh, that page should show up. So it's as simple as that. Similarly, if you wanted to get rid of a page that you're not going to use, like maybe you're not interested in getting applicant interest, or you don't really care about their applicant history or their scholastic information, you simply go here, click on it, and just delete it. It's not going to delete the page from the system. You can always add it back. It'll just delete it from the sitemap, so it won't show up on your left menu. That's all it'll do. So if you delete something from the sitemap, you're not really like permanently deleting from the system. You're just deleting it from the menu on your applicant, your application. So that's all I had to plan to cover today. In the next webinar, which is this Thursday, we'll go over teacher recommendations and apply online events. If you have any questions about this webinar, any comments, any suggestions, please email support@pcreducator.com. We'll post a recording of the webinar to the help page. And I really, really appreciate you were able to join me for today's webinar. Thank you. Have a great day.